I'd like to talk about what education could look like tomorrow. For me, it started at the dining room table with my mom a few years ago, and I was sharing some really cool news that I got accepted to this thing called the Google Teacher Academy. My mom looked at me and she said, "What is Google?" So I decided to show her Google Earth. I thought that would be a good start. And I said, "Check this out, Mom. You can go anywhere in the world. Just type it in." And so we went to Gerhardt, Oregon, beautiful little coastal town. She has a little booth in an antique mall down there. And I said, "Let's go check it out." And you could grab the little street view guide and put him on the ground. And I said, "How close are we?" She said, "You're almost there. Just go around to the left a little bit." So I spun the camera around. This is a real screen capture I took shortly after this happened, by the way. And I said, "There's your mall." And she was really excited. And then I said, "Is that your car?" And then I said, "Yeah, that is." And zoomed in, and I said, "And that's you getting out of your car." So you got to picture this. My mom, she's 70 years old. She didn't know what Google was. And we just appear to have found her right out of the gate from space. So she looked at me and she said, "Is that what it does?" And I said, "Yes." I figured at some point when I was 70, I'd be sitting across the table from one of my children and they would blow my mind. As luck would have it, I wouldn't have to wait that long, but I'll come back to that. This really reminded me of a quote I love from Margaret Mead, and it says, "Even very recently, the elders could say to the youths, 'You know, I have been young, and you never have been old.' But today's young people can reply, 'You never have been young in the world I am young in, and you never can be.' This break between generations is wholly new. It is planetary and universal." This quote was from a while back, but it's never been more true than right now, when it feels like we're in competition for the mind space of our kids in an age of relentless media and stimulation. The world has changed so much, and education hasn't. We're still obsessed with conformity and control and standardization. And I know I'm not the only teacher who thinks it's time for some serious reimagining. I was really lucky. I got to reinvent myself as a teacher a few years back when I met John Peplinski there on the left and learned about his vision for his school, Raleigh Hills, which was heavily influenced by the philosophies of that gentleman in the middle, whose name is Young Zhao. Young Zhao is a professor of education down at the University of Oregon, and he challenges us to reevaluate what we truly value in education, besides all the standardization. He talks of a skill set our kids need to navigate an unknown future. They need to be flexible, they need to be globally minded, resourceful, and most of all, creative. He calls this skill set put together entrepreneurialism. But after this morning, I'm going to change it to John Wexlerism. Yeah. In our school, that takes the shape of using technology to develop creative capacity in kids and hopefully to solve real problems. And in education, we do this thing where we have really great ideas and we talk a lot and then we don't do anything about it. And we actually got the chance to put some of these ideas to the test a few years ago when we hit some dark times. And our school, like so many others, as a result of the economic downturn, suffered brutal budget cuts. We lost whole programs, every school was affected, and every teacher in every building faced the very real possibility that we were going to get transferred or worse. And this was crushing to me because I had finally found some balance in my life, thanks to John. I almost totally burned out of teaching early on. I loved my job, but it took too much out of me, and I was never seeing my kids. And my kids were actually in the school now, and that was the coolest thing ever. And I was facing the real possibility that that was going to end. At the same time this was happening, something else happened as a result of all of these cuts. And we changed how we ran our elementary schools. So in addition to music and PE, kids got a technology time. So picture this, 20,000 elementary school students hooked up to the internet for 45 minutes at a stretch every few days with no plan. What could go wrong? We imagined quite a bit, not the least of which would be thousands of phone calls to the central office, but maybe, worst of all, that we would be wasting their time. So I got this idea to make a website, and I called it Studentsource. And I thought, at the very least, we could make a safe place for them to land. They could learn how to navigate the internet thoughtfully, get excited about science or math. It wasn't teaching. A machine can't and shouldn't replace a passionate teacher in the trenches. Yeah. Ever. But I wanted them to at least feel like someone valued this time more than just plugging them in. So that summer I went to work, and I started traveling all over the Northwest, trying to find interesting places to film and get kids excited. I found former students of mine that are doing amazing things. And then we thought this could be one of those times where we put that entrepreneurial idea to work. And our students started to create the content and started to find the activities and started to develop their creativity and publish. You know, the fact that dressing up like Boba Fett and driving up and down the Oregon Coast Highway was also a lifelong ambition of mine was purely coincidence. So that fall, our students watched as tens of thousands of kids started to go to this site and see the content that they created and play the activities that our kids had found for them. As time went on, we started to make more of it. This is some screenshots from kids making math and internet safety games on Scratch from MIT. And what I figured out was that when kids have this sense that things are going to a real person and it's a real project, you don't have to tell them to make it good. They want to make it good because it's real. And we felt like we sort of hit upon this unified field theory of brain research and behavior research that we were fascinated with. That's John Medina. He's up at the University of Washington, amazing brain researcher. And he says we are optimized in our brains to solve problems relating to our survival. That's Daniel Pink in the center wrote Drive, where he looks at decades of behavior research to find out what gives humans deep motivation, which in teaching is everything, in my opinion. He says there are three things that keep coming up: autonomy, our desires to be self-directed; mastery, our desire to get better at things; and purpose, that our work has meaning for ourselves and for others. And then there's Yang Zhao, who wants to put this entrepreneurial spirit at the center of what we do in education. All of these thought leaders were pointing to us to the same thing, involving our kids doing real work in school for real purpose. We started to get some attention, and we were invited to Washington, D.C. to present at a very prestigious technology conference, attended by Department of Education people from almost every state, the FCC, private industry, and the White House. And these 8th graders threw down, and they challenged that audience to reimagine what kids are capable of doing in school, especially with these new technologies that allow them the kind of access that the internet does. They were provoking and inspiring, and to many people in that audience, they were revolutionaries. At the end of that presentation, we shared this quote. At the bottom of each page of the website, there was a little Google feedback form, and kids could tell us what they thought. And this is what a 4th grader wrote. "I love how a kid made this module. The world needs more kid-made things." This 4th grader got it. She knew that a kid made this for her, and she used the word love in school. The technologies that our kids used to make this site and to publish to this global audience are unique to this time, but the need for us to reimagine education is not. It needed to happen when I was a kid, when you were kids, and when my dad was a kid. He was one of the guys that got churned under by this obsession with conformity and control. The only people who seemed to see his unique potential were military recruiters that wanted him to fly choppers in Vietnam. But what none of them knew is that he's a freak genius, and he sees things in his mind and he builds it out of steel. Yeah, just take that in for a second. And he did this in spite of a system that never was very interested in the uniqueness that he brought to the table. Margaret Mead said that he couldn't be young in the world that I am young in, but he sure tried. And there's a kid like him in every classroom, in every school, right now. Education is simply the soul of a society as it moves from one generation to the next. This is why I got into teaching, to impart the traditions that I thought were important, like the lock game, for instance, where you lock someone out in the rain. It's a really proud moment for me. But after this project, I started to ask myself, what if this soul sharing doesn't just go from the older generation to the young? What if the soul sharing goes both ways? What if we can reimagine what this is so that it's more of a collaboration with kids instead of for them, that draws out their uniqueness and develops their creativity? I think there's several ways we could do this. We just started a project we call Studentsource, where our kids go and work with senior citizens to teach them about technology. And in turn, they come to our school and read with our younger kids and do math. We are all young in this space together. I think there's this notion that when the algorithms get good enough, that we'll all be replaced. And I think it's misguided. And I'll tell you why. Remember I told you about sitting across the table from my mom and wondering when I was 70 what that was going to be like for me with my kids. I didn't have to wait that long because it happened in February. That's George. And he asked me this question while we were driving. He said, "Daddy, is there a heaven?" And I said, "I don't know, buddy. What do you think?" And he said, "Well, couldn't you just look it up on Google?" This question, which consumed most of my adolescence and wore out 3 copies of the same Doors album, was in his conception of the modern world a click away. He wasn't finding me from space. He was looking for heaven from a phone. We must try to be young in his world. And we must reimagine education, not as something we do to him or for him, but with him. This kid can make things, and our world needs it. We have to reimagine what education is, to do real work for real purpose with kids, so that when our students ask us that age-old question, when am I ever going to use this? We can say to them, tomorrow.